The wind howled through the Appalachian ridges, clawing at my tent like it wanted to rip my world apart. I wasn't ready for what was coming. Not the storm, not the truth, not the way my heart would betray me. By the time the night was over, everything I thought I knew about myself, my family, and the man shivering beside me would be gone, scattered like ashes in the frost. My name is Matthew, 38, a high school history teacher from Asheville, North Carolina. I've spent my life building walls, sturdy, predictable ones. Married to Clara for 10 years, I'd taken on the role of stepfather to her son, Ethan, when he was just 16. Ethan, now 28, had grown into a man I barely recognized, confident, sharp-witted, with a smile that could light up a room or break it in half. He'd moved to Seattle after college, chasing a tech job, but this hunting trip was his idea, a chance to reconnect, to bridge the gap that had widened between us over the years. We'd set out for the Pisgah National Forest, a place I'd hunted since I was a boy. The plan was simple: 3 days, 2 nights, tracking deer through the dense woods. Clara had laughed when Ethan suggested it, saying we'd either bond or kill each other. I'd chuckled too, but something in Ethan's eyes when he proposed the trip, a flicker of intensity, had stirred an unease I couldn't name. The first day was all business. We hiked 10 miles, set up camp near a rocky outcrop, and tracked a buck's prints until dusk. Ethan was a natural, moving through the forest with a grace that made my own steps feel clumsy. He'd tease me about my old man pace, his laughter echoing through the pines, and I'd fire back, calling him a city boy gone soft. It was easy, familiar, the kind of banter that had defined our relationship for years. But that night, as the temperature plummeted and the wind turned vicious, everything changed. Our tent was small, built for one, but Ethan's had ripped in a gust, leaving us no choice but to share mine. We zipped our sleeping bags together for warmth. The space, so tight our shoulders brushed with every breath. The cold was brutal, seeping through the nylon, and I could feel Ethan shivering beside me. "You okay, kid?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm fine, Matt," he said, but his teeth chattered. Without thinking, I shifted closer, wrapping an arm around him to share my heat. It was instinct, nothing more. At least, that's what I told myself. But the moment my arms settled over his chest, his body stilled, and the air between us thickened with something I couldn't name. His breathing slowed, deliberate, like he was holding on to the moment. My heart thudded, loud enough I was sure he could hear it. "Matt," he said, his voice low, "you ever think about what you're running from?" The question hit like a punch. I'd spent my life running, from doubts, from desires, from the parts of myself I'd buried under duty and routine. I was a husband, a stepfather, a man who followed the script. But lying there, with Ethan's warmth bleeding into me, I felt the script unraveling. "What do you mean?" I asked, my throat tight. He turned his head, his hazel eyes catching the faint glow of the lantern. "You, me, this." He paused, his gaze searching mine. "You feel it too, don't you?" I wanted to deny it, to laugh it off, to rebuild the walls. But his words cracked something open, something I'd locked away since I was a teenager, sneaking glances at my best friend in the locker room, telling myself it was nothing. Ethan wasn't nothing. He was everything. Too close, too real, too dangerous. "Ethan, we can't," I started, but he cut me off, his hand finding mine in the dark. His touch was electric, a spark that burned through every defense I had left. "Don't," he whispered. "Don't lie to me. Not tonight." The storm raged outside, but inside that tent, a different kind of tempest was building. I didn't move, didn't pull away. His fingers laced with mine, and for the first time in years, I let myself feel the truth I'd been hiding. I was falling for him, my stepson, the man I'd raised, the one person I should never want. And in that frozen, windswept night, I knew there was no going back. The next morning, the storm had passed, but the tension between us hadn't. We packed up in silence, avoiding each other's eyes. I told myself it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, but every glance at Ethan, his strong jaw, his steady hands, made my pulse race. We hiked deeper into the forest, tracking the buck, but my focus was shot. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, felt like the universe warning me to stop before I crossed a line I couldn't uncross. By noon, we'd set up a new camp near a frozen creek. Ethan built the fire, his movements precise, almost defiant. "We need to talk," he said, not looking at me. "About last night." "There's nothing to talk about." I lied, my voice sharper than I meant. But Ethan wasn't having it. He stood, closing the distance between us, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and something softer, something that scared me more. "Don't do that, Matt," he said. "Don't pretend it didn't happen. I felt you. I know you felt it too." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words died. He was right. I'd felt it. The pull, the ache, the forbidden truth that had been there all along, buried under years of denial. I thought of Clara, of the life we'd built, of the vows I'd made. But standing there, with Ethan's breath visible in the cold air, I realized I'd been lying to myself long before I ever met her. "Ethan, it's wrong," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm your stepfather. I'm married. We can't." "Why not?" he challenged, stepping closer. "Because of what people will say? Because of some rule you're too scared to break? I'm not a kid anymore, Matt. I know what I want. And I know you want it too." His words were a blade, cutting through every excuse I had. I wanted to run, to hide, to pretend I was still the man I'd been yesterday. But Ethan's gaze held me, unflinching, and for the first time, I saw him not as my stepson, but as a man who saw me, all of me, and wasn't afraid. The rest of the day passed in a blur. We hunted, we ate, we spoke in clipped sentences, but the air between us crackled with unspoken truths. As night fell, we crawled back into the tent, the same cramped space where everything had changed. This time, there was no storm to blame, no cold to justify our closeness. But when Ethan reached for my hand again, I didn't pull away. The fire outside our tent had died to embers, but inside, the heat between Ethan and me was alive, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. His hand in mine felt like a lifeline and a landmine all at once. I lay there, staring at the tent's ceiling, my mind a battlefield of guilt, desire, and fear. "Matt," Ethan whispered, his voice soft but steady. "You don't have to keep fighting this." I turned to face him, his features sharp in the dim glow of the lantern. At 28, Ethan was no longer the lanky teenager I'd help with algebra homework. He was a man, tall, lean, with a quiet strength that made my chest ache. His hazel eyes held a vulnerability I hadn't seen before, and it unraveled me. "I'm scared, Ethan," I admitted, the words spilling out before I could stop them. It's not just about us. It's Clara, our family, everything I've built. If we do this, it'll destroy it all." He didn't flinch. "Maybe it's already broken," he said quietly. "Maybe you've been holding on to something that's been gone for a long time." His words stung because they were true. My marriage to Clara had been fraying for years, held together by routine and obligation. I loved her, but it was a love born of habit, not passion. I'd buried my own desires so deep I'd forgotten what it felt like to want something, someone, this fiercely. Ethan shifted closer, his breath warm against my cheek. "I've wanted you for years, Matt," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I tried to move on, to tell myself it was wrong. But every time I saw you, it was there, stronger than before. I came on this trip because I needed to know if you felt it too." My heart pounded, a drumbeat of panic and longing. I thought of the boy he'd been, the one who'd trusted me to guide him, and the man he'd become, the one who saw through my carefully constructed facade. I wanted to tell him to stop, to leave, to let me cling to the lie I'd lived for so long. But when his lips brushed mine, tentative, searching, I didn't pull away. The kiss was slow, deliberate, a question and an answer all at once. It was wrong, forbidden, a betrayal of everything I'd vowed to be. But it was also the most honest thing I'd ever done. His hands found my face, pulling me closer, and for a moment, the world outside the tent ceased to exist. There was only Ethan, only us, only this truth I'd been too afraid to face. When we finally pulled apart, my breath was ragged, my mind reeling. "We can't keep doing this," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Ethan's eyes searched mine, unwavering. "Then tell me to stop, Matt. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away. I'll never bring it up again." I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. Because I did want this, wanted him, with a ferocity that terrified me. Instead of speaking, I pulled him back to me, our lips crashing together with a hunger I'd never known. The tent, The cold, the world, it all faded. There was only Ethan, his touch, his warmth, his truth. The next morning, guilt hit like a tidal wave. I woke before Ethan, slipping out of the tent to watch the sunrise over the misty ridges. The forest was quiet, the air crisp, but my mind was a storm. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and the weight of it threatened to crush me. Clara's face flashed in my mind. Her laugh, her trust, the life we'd built. What had I done? Ethan emerged from the tent, his hair mussed, his expression unreadable. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle but cautious. "No," I said honestly. "I don't know what I'm doing, Ethan. I don't know how to be this." He nodded, like he'd expected it. "I know it's complicated, but I meant what I said last night. I'm not going to pretend I don't feel this, and I don't think you can either." He was right, but that didn't make it easier. We packed up camp in near silence, the weight of our actions hanging between us. The day's hunt was a distraction, but every glance at Ethan, his strong hands gripping the rifle, his quiet focus, stirred something in me I couldn't suppress. By dusk, we'd bagged a small deer, but the victory felt hollow. The real battle was inside me, and I was losing. That night, we sat by the fire, the tension between us palpable. "We need to figure this out," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Not just for us, but for Clara, for everyone." "I know," I said, staring into the flames. "But I don't even know where to start. I've spent my whole life pretending to be someone I'm not. And now I don't know who I am anymore." Ethan reached for my hand, his touch grounding me. "You're you, Matt. And that's enough. We'll figure it out together." His words were a lifeline, but they didn't erase the fear. I thought of Clara, of the pain this would cause her, of the life I'd have to dismantle, to be honest. But for the first time, I let myself imagine a different future, one where I didn't have to hide, where I could love Ethan without shame. It was a fragile hope, but it was enough to keep me from running. As we crawled into the tent that night, I knew we were standing on the edge of something irreversible. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to turn back. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Ethan and I sat by the fire, our hands still entwined. The stars above were sharp, cutting through the night like accusations. I wanted to believe we could carve out a space for this, for us, but the weight of reality was crushing. "Matt," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "What happens when we go back? To Asheville? To Clara? To everything?" I stared into the flames, my throat tight. "I don't know," I admitted. "I want to say we can figure it out, but I'm terrified. Clara doesn't deserve this. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to face what comes next." Ethan's grip tightened. "You're stronger than you think. You've been carrying this secret your whole life. You've been strong enough to hide it. Now you just need to be strong enough to live it." His words hit hard, peeling back layers of denial I'd worn like armor. Growing up in a small southern town, I'd learned early to bury anything that didn't fit. I'd watched friends get ostracized, families torn apart, all for daring to love differently. I'd chosen safety, marriage, stability, a life that looked right on paper. But Ethan had seen through it, and now I couldn't unsee it myself. We didn't kiss that night. Instead, we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Ethan told me about his own struggles, coming out in college, the relationships that had fizzled because he couldn't stop comparing every man to me. I told him about the guilt, the fear, the moments I'd almost broken down and confessed everything to Clara. It was raw, painful, but it felt like a release, like lancing a wound I'd let fester too long. By morning, the air was colder, the sky heavy with the threat of snow. We broke camp early, our movements synchronized but silent. The hunt was over, we'd bagged our deer, and the trip was nearing its end. But the real journey, the one between us, was just beginning. As we hiked back toward the trailhead, Ethan stopped suddenly, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "Matt, look," he said, pointing to a lone deer standing in a clearing, its breath visible in the chill. It was beautiful, untouched, a moment of grace in the chaos of my thoughts. I glanced at Ethan, his face lit with quiet awe, and my heart ached with how much I loved him. Not just as a stepfather, but as a man. The drive back to Asheville was quiet, the hum of the truck's engine filling the space where words failed. Ethan reached for my hand once, briefly, and I let him. It was a small act, but it felt like a promise. When we pulled into the driveway, Clara was waiting, her smile bright but tinged with something I couldn't read. Guilt twisted in my gut like a knife. Successful trip? She asked, hugging Ethan first, then me. Her warmth was familiar, comforting, but it felt like a lie now. Yeah, I said, forcing a smile. We got a deer. Ethan's eyes met mine, a silent question in them. I looked away, unable to answer. That night, as Clara slept beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Ethan was in the guest room, just down the hall, and the distance between us felt like a chasm and a magnet all at once. The next day, I went through the motions, teaching my classes, grading papers, playing the part of the man I'd always been. But every moment was haunted by Ethan. His laugh, his touch, the way he'd looked at me in the tent. I was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop it. That evening, Ethan found me in the garage, cleaning my rifle. We need to talk, he said, his voice firm. You can't keep pretending, Matt. Not after this. I'm trying, I said, my hands shaking. But I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to hurt her. You're hurting yourself, he said, stepping closer. And you're hurting me. I love you, Matt. I've loved you for years. And I think you love me too. The words hung between us, raw and undeniable. I wanted to deny them, to push him away, to cling to the life I'd built. But I couldn't. I do. I whispered, the confession tearing me apart. God help me, I do. Ethan's face softened, and he reached for me, but I stepped back. Not here, I said, glancing toward the house. Not now. He nodded, but his eyes were heavy with hurt. Then when, Matt? When are you going to stop running? I didn't have an answer. That night, I dreamed of the forest, of Ethan's hand in mine, of a life where I wasn't afraid. But when I woke, the weight of reality was still there, heavier than ever. Days passed, but the tension didn't. Ethan stayed in Asheville, working remotely from the guest room, his presence a constant reminder of the truth I couldn't escape. Every glance, every accidental brush of his hand, was a spark that threatened to ignite everything I'd built. Clara noticed the strain. She wasn't blind, but she chalked it up to the trip, to the exhaustion of the hunt. I let her believe it, hating myself for the lie. I started avoiding Ethan, burying myself in work, staying late at school to grade papers I'd already graded. But he wasn't so easily deterred. One evening, as I sat in the school's empty parking lot, he pulled up in his rental car, his expression a mix of frustration and determination. Matt, we can't keep doing this, he said, climbing into my truck. You're shutting me out, and it's killing me. I'm trying to protect everyone. I snapped, my hands gripping the steering wheel. You think this is easy for me? I'm married, Ethan. I made vows. I can't just. You can't keep living a lie, he interrupted, his voice sharp. You're not protecting Clara. You're hurting her by pretending. And you're hurting yourself. His words echoed the ones he'd said in the tent, and they hit just as hard. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the truth was clawing its way out, and I was too tired to fight it. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice breaking. I want you to be honest, he said, his eyes softening. With Clara, with yourself, with me. I want you to stop being afraid of who you are. I laughed, a bitter sound. You make it sound so simple. But it's not. If I do this, if I tell her, it'll destroy everything. Her or me, us. You don't know what it's like to lose everything. I know what it's like to hide, he said quietly. I did it for years, Matt. I know how heavy it is. But I also know what it's like to be free. And I want that for you. For us. His words hung in the air, a lifeline I was too scared to grab. But before I could respond, he leaned across the console and kissed me, quick and desperate, like he was afraid I'd vanish. I froze, my heart racing, but I didn't pull away. For a moment, I let myself feel it. The want, the love, the possibility of a life I'd never dared to imagine. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I'm not giving up on you, he said. But I can't keep doing this halfway. You need to decide, Matt. For both our sakes. He got out of the truck, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I sat there for hours, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I thought of Clara, of the life we'd built, of the man I'd pretended to be. And I thought of Ethan, of the way he made me feel alive, like I was finally waking up after years of sleepwalking. The next day, I called in sick and drove to a coffee shop on the edge of town, a place where no one knew me. I needed space to think, to figure out what came next. But as I sat there, staring at my untouched latte, Clara texted me. Can we talk tonight? I know something's wrong. Panic gripped me. Did she know? Had she seen something, sensed it? I texted back a quick sure, my hands shaking. When I got home, Ethan was gone. Back to Seattle, Clara said, for a work emergency. The relief was fleeting, replaced by a hollow ache. He'd left without saying goodbye, and I didn't know if it was a reprieve or a rejection. That night, Clara and I sat at the kitchen table, the silence heavy between us. "Matt," she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. "What's going on? You've been distant since the trip. Did something happen with Ethan?" My heart stopped. I wanted to lie, to tell her it was nothing, but her eyes held mine, and I saw the truth reflected there. She knew something was wrong, even if she didn't know what. "Clara," I started, my voice barely audible. "I need to tell you something." The words stuck in my throat, but I forced them out. I told her about the trip, about the tent, about the feelings I'd buried for years. I told her I was gay, that I'd been hiding it my whole life, that I'd fallen for Ethan. Each word was a knife, cutting through the life we'd built, but it was also a release, a confession I'd carried too long. Clara listened, her face pale, her hands trembling. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I think I've always known," she said finally, her voice breaking. "Not about Ethan, but about you. I just didn't want to see it." "I'm so sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I never wanted to hurt you." "I know," she said, her own eyes wet. "But you have, and I don't know if I can forgive you for this." She stood, leaving the kitchen, and I sat there, alone, the weight of my choices crushing me. I'd told the truth, but at what cost? The house felt like a ghost town after Clara left the kitchen. She didn't speak to me for days, retreating to the guest room while I slept on the couch. The silence was worse than any argument, a constant reminder of the pain I'd caused. I'd wanted to be free, but freedom came with a price I hadn't fully grasped. Ethan texted me once, a simple "I'm here when you're ready." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My world was collapsing, and I didn't know if I had the strength to rebuild it. Clara deserved better than this, better than me. And Ethan, he deserved someone who wasn't afraid, someone who could love him without tearing everything apart. A week later, Clara asked me to meet her at a park near our house. The air was crisp, the leaves a riot of red and gold, but the beauty felt mocking. She sat on a bench, her hands folded in her lap, her face calm but distant. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady. "I can't stay in this marriage, Matt. Not after this." I nodded, my throat tight. "I understand," I said. "I never wanted to hurt you, Clara. I swear." "I know," she said, her eyes softening. "But you did. And I need to figure out who I am without you. Without this." We talked for hours, not about Ethan, but about us, our marriage, our mistakes, the love we'd had and lost. It was painful, but it was honest, and for the first time, I felt like we were seeing each other clearly. When we parted, she hugged me, a brief, bittersweet gesture that felt like goodbye. I moved out the next day, renting a small apartment downtown. The solitude was both a relief and a punishment. I missed Clara, missed the life we'd had, but I also missed Ethan, the way he'd challenged me, the way he'd made me feel alive. I wanted to reach out, but fear held me back. What if he'd changed his mind? What if I wasn't enough? Weeks passed, and I threw myself into work, into therapy, into unraveling the man I'd been and the man I wanted to be. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, helped me confront the shame I'd carried for years, the fear that had kept me in the closet. "You're allowed to love, Matthew," she said one session. "You're allowed to be happy." Her words stayed with me, a beacon in the darkness. I started reaching out to old friends, coming out to the ones I trusted, rebuilding my life piece by piece. It wasn't easy. Some turned away, others embraced me, but it was a start. And through it all, Ethan's absence was a constant ache. One night, as I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone, I finally texted him, "Can we talk?" His reply came seconds later, "I'm on the next flight." He arrived the next evening, his hair longer, his eyes tired but bright. We met at a bar downtown, a quiet place with dim lights and soft music. "I thought you'd given up on me," he said, his voice teasing but laced with relief. "Never," I said, and for the first time, I meant it. We talked for hours, about the trip, about Clara, about the future. He told me he'd been waiting, giving me space to figure things out, but he hadn't stopped loving me. And I told him the truth, that I was scared, but I was ready to try. When we left the bar, he took my hand, and I didn't pull away. We walked through the streets of Asheville, the city lights reflecting in his eyes, and I felt something I hadn't in years: hope. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't easy, but it was real. That night, in my apartment, we didn't hold back. His touch was a promise, a future I could finally see. And as we lay together, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by something new, something worth fighting for. Months later, I stood in the same forest where it all began, the Pisgah National Forest, but this time, Ethan was beside me, not as my stepson, but as my partner. The air was warm, the trees alive with the hum of spring, and the weight of the past felt lighter, like a wound finally healing. Clara and I had finalized our divorce, a painful but necessary step. She'd moved to Raleigh, starting a new chapter, and we'd found a fragile peace. She didn't hate me, and that was more than I'd dared to hope for. Ethan and I had taken things slow, navigating the complexities of our relationship with care. There were whispers, judgments, people who didn't understand, but there were also those who did, friends who stood by us, who saw the love we shared and celebrated it. We'd rented a cabin for the weekend, not to hunt, but to be together, to reclaim the forest as a place of beginnings, not endings. As we sat by a campfire, Ethan's hand in mine, I thought about the night that had changed everything: the cold, the tent, the truth we'd finally faced. You ever think about how different things could have been? Ethan asked, his voice soft. All the time, I said, squeezing his hand. But I wouldn't change it. Not if it brought us here. He smiled, that same smile that had undone me all those months ago, and leaned in to kiss me. It was slow, tender, a moment of quiet amidst the chaos of our journey. The forest stretched out around us, vast and unyielding, but for the first time, I didn't feel lost in it. Coming out had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. It had cost me my marriage, my old life, the safety of the closet. But it had given me something greater: myself, Ethan, a love I'd never thought possible. I'd spent years running from who I was, but in that tent, in that storm, I'd found the courage to stop. We stayed by the fire late into the night, talking about the future, moving in together, maybe leaving Asheville for a fresh start. There were still challenges ahead, questions we couldn't answer, but we'd face them together. And as I looked at Ethan, his face glowing in the firelight, I knew I'd made the right choice. The world wasn't perfect, and neither were we. But we were honest, and that was enough. The forest, once a place of secrets and shame, was now a testament to our truth, a reminder that love, no matter how complicated, was worth fighting for. And as we walked back to the cabin, hand in hand, I felt something I hadn't in years: whole.